Welcome to Defin. Yes, episode number 84 with me, Vijay, with his border collie, and with Bowie, not a border collie. I think he'll get offended if I don't say his name. I have a name, you know.
Say my name.
Say my name. And we have Ray with Eula. And special guest today, the Corgi. I forgot the name, sorry. And we need to mention your
We
dog's
haven't
name
had his
first.
name yet. We haven't got his name.
Yeah.
Her name,
it's
actually.
called Debbie.
Her name.
It's Debbie.
Sorry?
Debbie.
It's Debbie. Yeah.
Princess Debbie.
Nice. So we have Debbie and her, guy, some dude, Wilker,
Yeah, I'm just here to bring the dog in the scene. Don't mind me.
Anyway, so Wilker, welcome to Defin.
You've got to give him his full name as well, you know. You've got to.
Oh yeah, that's true. So Wilker, welcome to the show. As I was just saying, it's been a long time since we saw each other as well. So what's happening with you, and where are you right now?
Well, before that, what about the where you met him? Was that?
Yes, we met at Dutch Clojure Day because he gave a talk about Pathom at that time already.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Amsterdam.
Yeah. Yes. I think it had a different name, but I can't remember the name of my talk right now.
It's okay. It's there on the internet, I'm pretty sure. It's people that are more important.
I must have missed that episode. I thought I went to every Dutch Clojure Days, but I don't remember the Pathom talk. So God damn it.
Yeah, it's been a long it's some time ago. It was a great excuse to go to the Netherlands.
Implementing graph APIs with Clojure.
Yes.
This was 2018. Yeah. This was 2018.
Oh no, I do remember that talk. Yeah. It was a good one. It was lots of details. It wasn't about GraphQL mostly.
Yeah. No, I had to make comparisons because back then, even GraphQL was a bit edgy. So if I want to get something closer that people can rely,
was that a joke, by the way, that GraphQL was edgy?
Was it G?
It was edging on the graphs. It doesn't matter. Okay. Now it's a bit naughty.
Yeah. But it's been it's not that long ago. I mean 2018 is but thanks to the pandemic,
it's just
it feels
that
like
the last 2 years feel like 20 so long.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like 20 and nothing as well, isn't it? One of the dog owners in the park today, we were talking about stuff, and he was like, "Oh yeah, it was a year ago when the beginning of the pandemic," and it's like, "No, it's 2 years ago." It's like shit, I think everyone feels like that, that it was just a year ago, but actually, it's 2 years, and you've got to touch yourself to realize, God, really, time has really passed,
Yeah. Anyway, it was in 2018, I think. So what have we been up to, Wilker? I think we should talk about, so where are you based, by the way? Are you still in Brazil?
Yes, I am in the center of São Paulo here. Still, when they were called Moema. And right now I'm working in a company called People Saúde. That's, we sell health insurance for companies. So it's a business B2B thing.
Yeah.
And working with Clojure and trying to get Pathom in new planes.
So is Brazil like America then? You have like health insurance. You don't have like a health service, like a government health service.
We have that too. We have some public things, but it's very common, especially in companies, to have private ones as well, because then it's easier to get like better consultations and exams. But if you don't have, there is a public option here. A public free option.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's actually, for example, in my hometown city, because I'm not from São Paulo, I'm from Recife. Like the hospital, one of the public hospitals there is actually one of the best. Like if people get in really bad situation, could be, or some sickness, or even somebody got shot or something, they are the best. Even if you have private, they usually go there first, just for the first attendance to get to don't die. and then they get, if they have conditions, they get transferred after to some more comfortable place.
Okay, so it's kind of like make a hospital more like a hotel. This insurance.
Yeah, as well, but in the day-to-day things, it's better to use it, right? I was talking about a more extreme case, Google there, just to say that we have these public hospitals have very good doctors for like this emergency stuff.
Right.
Like very emergency. Yeah, very urgent stuff.
So it's not like the US then. It's I don't think there is any public.
No, it's not. No, it's not like
public
the
insurance
US.
in the US, right?
No, it's not. I think in the US you have to pay anyway, right?
I think there are public hospitals. No, I mean, come on, there must be. Wasn't that that was a big series in the US? Saint something or other. Saint Elsewhere. There was a big TV series called Saint Elsewhere.
But I think if you have to go to the hospital, they will assist you, but then they'll send you the bill.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I thought there were public hospitals, but they're they're kind of like run down, not exactly run down, but overwhelmed.
Yeah, like I'm no expert. Things may have changed. So
I think the most complicated thing that I hear from American friends, and American friends, please ping me if I'm wrong about this, is that there's a complexity around like what is in the plan. So if you have an insurance plan, then it's difficult to know which doctors or which medical conditions or which particular aspects of your healthcare are covered by the plan that you have. Which seems mental to me. I mean, it just seems like it seems like completely a crazy idea that you can't, have insurance and just say, okay, right now, just treat me, please, in the best possible way.
Because I get all my knowledge from the Twitter feeds, right? So
oh my God!
Probably citations and everything, fact checked. Anyway, so somebody was tweeting a thread about the U.S. medical system.
Yeah.
So even if you go to a hospital where everything is covered in the insurance, the doctor might not be covered.
Oh my God! How crazy is this?
Yeah. So they're listing out like all sorts of ways, like how many ways, like ambulance is not covered, for example, and that's run by a different company. So that's not part of this one. And the insurance people can say, oh, why did you use this drug? Because we are only going to pay 80% of the other drug, and your doctor prescribed this drug, so we are going to only pay 50% of it. So it's a fucking maze, the whole Twitter thread was.
Yeah. But is it like that in Brazil or Wilker, or is it more like you're kind of essentially queue jumping if you go private,
I think like there is I see a trend that is getting more in that direction, sadly. It doesn't used to be like that. It used to be like just pay for a plan, which is relatively cheap, and then you get everything. Right now, those plans still exist, but they're getting more and more expensive. They are creating over time more and more this specific stuff, like you were just saying. So it's kind of sad. Hopefully, if we change presidents, maybe we can get stuff in that direction.
So what does your business do then in that respect? You're selling insurance to businesses. Do you get involved in that kind of like have to understand all of those options and complexities?
I may have to get to it eventually. Of course, I have some exposure because we have to see like all these plans, and even to make the quotes and things like that, it's quite a complex process because everything is super manual. So they don't have any systems. Like they have some, if you are trying to sell for a company that it's up to 100 people, then they have some automatic things to get the budget, like the value for it. But if it's not, then you have to send an email for somebody that's going to get the information, process for like a week, and then send you back another email. And then you have to have manual people to get that because they're not consistent at all. So every company does its own way. Some companies have consistent between themselves. Some companies don't even have that. So it's a bit complicated to inject technology there. So you have to do a lot. So there's a lot of groundwork to be done if we want to really get to a fully automated, efficient system. But trying to move in that direction.
So how does Clojure like fit into that? Are you kind of like using what exactly are you building? I mean, is it Is it okay to talk about that, or is it still early days?
Or maybe we should start from you should start from the beginnings.
Oh,
How,
no,
how
come
did you
on.
end up?
Come on, I asked him
How
a nice
did you end up
question
in
there.
Brazil?
How did wasn't he part of the public health system? You know, it's like
We have to
I
get
mean,
there because that's what you're working on. You know.
I mean, we use Clojure mostly because this company is founded by an ex-Nubanker. As myself, I actually worked with him in my first team at Nubank. So
Okay.
it's
right,
like
okay.
we believe Clojure is good, so we kind of just using it. And I'm also in the company because it does Clojure. Because nowadays I would have to have a really, really strong reason to join a non-Clojure company because I love Clojure.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it would be weird. Yeah.
yeah, without Paradit, how can edit code without Paradit? I don't know how to do that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, occasionally I've got to dive into other code bases like JavaScript or or Go or Rust or something or C, and it's a nightmare because everything you always want to open the parentheses. It's like now it's hard coded in.
Yeah, now I have to
yeah.
remember this thing about operator predecessors,
Oh my
like
God!
order of
Yeah.
operators.
Precedents.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Ah.
I think we
Yeah,
should have
so
every language should have a Lisp version that transpiles into the language. So when you move
Yes.
between languages,
Yes.
yeah,
you
we're
just keep
actually
writing Lisp.
seems like we're going on that direction, right?
Yes.
Clojure Dar, Clojure Erlang.
Yeah.
Hopefully one
yeah.
day we get to feel all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like an ideal, perfect situation. Yeah.
So what is the stack you're using at the new company then? I mean, it's kind of inevitable that you and the founder both are in Clojure, so you pick Clojure everywhere, I guess.
Yeah, I
So
mean, the company is 2 years old, but I joined it like a couple months ago. I think it's about
okay.
6-7 months, so I'm
Mhm.
not there for that long.
Yeah.
But the rest of the stacks mostly event sourcing things.
Mhm.
So we
Right.
use a lot of Dynamo and Kafka,
Yeah.
and they're trying to add some Datomic to the game as well to
Okay.
improve things because event sourcing is good, but they're trying to do event sourcing for everything, and that has some difficulties for evolving because
Yeah.
changing an event system is a bit trickier. So
Yeah.
we're trying to improve the developer efficiency by moving to a more database centric instead of just event sourcing. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what we're experimenting now, but it's very early stages. Most of it is still running on top of event sourcing.
Okay. But is it mostly API sort of thing, or do you have like website and other
J-
front ends like
just for
UI?
the business, right? For the companies that hire, so
Yeah.
they have some web UI that can see some things and help
Yeah.
fill up documents. A lot of
Yep.
the problems is with this filling up of things, like
Yeah.
getting all the data you need to send to the insurance companies so they can approve or not or give the price.
Okay. So are those really old? Like you get all this data and then you have to create SOAP envelopes and then call SOAP.
Oh yeah, I mean a lot of things are go through spreadsheets, man. Like just spreadsheet go
Yeah, I was
there,
going to say,
spreadsheet come back.
SOAP is relatively modern, At least it's a programmatic interface,
Yeah.
Spreadsheets, CSVs,
So it's basically you send an Excel sheet in the end, and then somebody does the Excel sheet and then sends it back, and then you parse it, and then
Yeah.
man, yeah. I think these industries they never move beyond that one. That
Yeah, yeah. They seems like there's no much incentives there, right? Until
Yes.
somebody goes and change something, they're not
Yeah.
like they
Yeah.
don't care that much has been working for them. And then you have to get somebody to just change the game and say, okay, if you don't do that now, you're gonna be behind.
I mean, if you see from the other perspective, like from the business perspective, where things supposed to last, and every 2 days, we as software people show up and then say spreadsheets are the best, man. You need to use DBase or whatever, and they're like, okay, fine, I'm gonna buy it. And 4 days later, you know what? You need to switch to Windows 3.1 and then install whatever the fuck that shit. And Lotus Notes is the big deal, and oh shit, I need to migrate again, and then so you can imagine from the other side, like every 5 years or every 3 years, state of the art keeps changing, and they need to reinvest the money, then probably the business people are like, well, fuck it. No,
I think
doesn't make any sense.
the other thing that's really, I think that people are kind of like, let's say, I don't say they're rejecting, but I think they're beginning to kind of like get a bit fed up with, is always having to ask IT for things or the developers for things, and they would like a little bit more, like, you know, the people who are experts in the domain, they would like to be able to maintain their own system.
Yeah, but is it something changing now? I thought that is the whole point of having Excel and spreadsheets, right? Because they took control in a weird way, to have the process, to have the macros, whatever they're written, and pivot tables and Excel formulas and sheets and magic.
But I think what usually happens,
it is there already.
Yeah, but what usually happens, you know, maybe your experience is different from mine, but my experience was that people used Excel to kind of develop solutions to work out what the business looked like and how it should work. And then they kind of, within their own work group, they used this Excel sheet, but then they wanted to kind of spread it further along the company. And it just didn't scale because that person who's looking after that Excel spreadsheet, well, A, I don't know if he's going to stay with the company. B, he doesn't really know what he's doing anyway. You know, he's done this spreadsheet, but he doesn't know, like, he doesn't necessarily want to evolve it. He doesn't want to stay with that spreadsheet for the rest of his life, you know? And also, it just doesn't scale, it turns out, you know? As you add more and more groups and more people, and they've got more and more demands that he doesn't take or she doesn't care about, it all becomes problematic. So typically then you get IT involved, and they make a web front end and they make a database back end, and everything turns to shit, basically. And you've got to keep involving IT with it forever, you know?
But nowadays you can run JavaScript on the spreadsheet, so you can just solve all these problems there.
Oh, then you have, as the saying goes, then you have a million more problems, or maybe then you have an undefined problems. You know,
never write off JavaScript is the what the JavaScript people say. Never write off JavaScript.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Yeah, but I mean, let's say they are using all these spreadsheets, and so how do you like motivate them, Wilker, to use your software?
I mean, I guess the kind of strategy is trying to automate what we can, right? The parts that we see that have some consistency, you can try to automate, do imports of that, maybe even get to some OCR at some point.
Yeah.
And
you're in OCR still. You actually paper.
No, we are not. We are not doing it. Okay. That is just a possibility.
Oh, right. Okay. That's a far advanced. That's an advanced future system that you perceive.
Yeah, it could be at some point. But I also like if there are different types of company, right? Some of them are most modern than others. So we can also talk to them and explain to them, getting me to say, hey, what do you think about we try to do it this way and we can be more efficient, and trying to talk and convince, and maybe little by little we can get there. Like once we have one working pretty well, maybe we can show, see, with this one we can work very fast. And I guess that's the way that I see it maybe evolving over time.
And from their perspective, what do they get out of it? What is their, you know, apart from like efficiency? Efficiency is a code word for something, but what does it mean? Does it mean more money, or does it mean better service for their customers, or, you know, what's the kind of narrative that they're buying into?
Depends on what persona we're talking about here, right? If you talk about the insurance providers, maybe it could be like getting faster deals, or like less cost in operation, because we can reduce the operational cost of them if we can automate a bunch of stuff. There is for the companies that are hiring the service, because right now it's kind of a painful process to fill all the data, because they have to get a bunch of data from the company, a bunch of data from every member of the company, like what illness they have, like age, where they live, like many different steps require a lot of information. And the HR people are like fed up with a lot of stuff to do, and then they suddenly have to get all this data to send us because without. And sometimes they even think that we are wanting this data. Like, no, it's not because we want it. It's because the insurance companies need that. Otherwise, they can't give us a quote for your thing. So trying to get all of this flowing better because it takes a long time. Like sometimes it can take like 3 or 6 months for somebody to get health insurance ready.
Wow. Now, the other question I've got for you, which is kind of like, I think it's a hot topic. I think it is in the UK anyway. I'm not sure what it's like in Brazil or, in Europe or in America. But, I can guess.
Oh, and just to be clear, okay, everything that I'm saying is my kind of personal opinions.
It's okay.
No, I mean this is
we're
just considering
disclaimers and caveats.
You're the spokesperson of your company.
Yeah. Come on. Yeah.
I don't think anybody is gonna take it as word to word.
No. We're not gonna hold. We're not gonna take. No one's going to court over this lot.
Nobody's listening to this stuff. Trust me. We'll just have moved away from this nonsense.
Yeah, but there is a sort of a super interesting question for me about health data and personal data, which is like privacy, because medical conditions and all these kind of things. So and again, I don't know whether Clojure specifically helps us here with all the immutability because you can't get rid of the fucking thing. Just what is it about like healthcare data and all this kind of stuff, which must be super private? How do you deal with that in a kind of respectful way and a sensitive way?
Yeah, I think that's a complicated issue. It makes me remember, I think when I was with you, VJ, was right when the LGPD law stuff was starting to get in practice, and everybody using Datomic was like, oh my God, GDPR. And like, oh my God, I use Datomic. What do I do now?
Yes, because I think at the point there was no excision in Datomic, right? You can't.
Yeah, there is no
they
excision.
did it specifically for that. Yeah.
Although it's excision is not really a feature for that because it's really painful to do an excision. So you can't do like routinely. Like if every week 2 or 3 people are asking for remove their data, it's not something you want to be doing like that often.
Yeah.
So far, what I see people doing is more about going via encryption. So you encrypt the data of somebody with specific key, and you can just lost this key. That's as valid as removing the data.
Yeah.
And in Brazil, we have 2 different categories of information, of private information. You have the PIIs, which is the personal identifiable information. Yeah, but also there is the PMIs, that's personal medical information, because this one you have to care much
Next
more
level.
than the PIIs.
Yeah.
So right now it's done via encryption as well, like similar strategy. We're also we don't have an answer for that. I don't have at least in my head, but I believe will be something around this encryption thing, and that's where I like. I think the attribute design stuff, modeling things around attributes, can help a lot because it gets much easier to I can mark an attribute as a PMI, and then my whole system can know that's PMI. So if any part of the system can be aware of that, we can write constructs that deal with that properly, no matter where it's being stored or rendered.
So it's part of your model then, like every attribute that you have has a tag or something in the all the way in the database to application layer. Everybody knows that it is specific type.
Yeah, this is the way I think could be a way to solve this.
Yeah, some metadata
to handle this problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the other way I've seen it in cryptography is that what you do is you have a salted hash, and then basically you lose the salt. So you can kind of that's a nice way of doing it because it's very fine grained. Yeah, because of the salt, fine grained. It doesn't matter. Okay. It's works. It's salt. True. Also, it's funny. Anyway,
coarse grained.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's a very fancy salt. That one. Yeah.
Yeah.
The rock salt. Anyway, yeah. So I think that's really interesting. Is it? But just quickly, does do datomic and functional programming and mutability, does that play into your thinking in those terms, or are you just like, no, we're using cryptography, so it's like a completely orthogonal thing?
I think it's a bit orthogonal. The thing that helps is just is, to me personally, I think the idea of attribute driven, because when you compare, right, you guys may have seen me talking about this before already, but what we call the container types, when you map stuff like person, like company, this is the pervasive model. And this model is quite hard to navigate across a whole company thing. Because your models, they are not generally very portable, and you don't know what you're talking about, because you may have a person, and then you have a simple person, a person with something,
a patient, a doctor,
exactly, and they will share attributes, but there is no like a robust definition that says that the name for a person and the name for a patient are the same thing. A human might infer that, but systematically as a program, you can't know that attributes across types mean the same thing, which means you have to keep repeating their definitions. And that doesn't cross boundaries of languages, boundaries of runtimes. And that's where I think when you design things with the attribute modeling in mind, the attribute is just a name that you put some semantics on it and say, hey, this is my name. The type of this is a string. The generators I have for these will generate human names. And this is personal information that I have wherever database that says, could be a Clojure map that says these attributes PII, true or false. So you can, and because the attribute is just a name, you can rely on the semantics anywhere you use that name. You don't have to care about if it's in a person, in a patient, in a doctor. So this is kind of part of the research that I kind of do for Pathom and attribute modeling, because I'm very interested. Because I believe when you use this, you can have this kind of leverage about your information that otherwise gets consistently repeated.
Yeah. Do you know about like this this thing in the security world of ABAC and RBAC?
No, I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, because they basically have a very similar idea. They have something called role-based authority and attribute-based authority, or role-based access controls, and which is RBAC, and ABAC is attribute-based authority controls or access controls. And it's a very similar model, because what the problem with role-based access controls is that, like you say, it ends up everybody has different versions of this roles or different interpretations of this roles. So you look at LDAP databases, and at a certain point, as the company scales and scales and scales, I remember talking to a security company about this, that the number of groups in the LDAP exceed the number of users.
Yes.
Oh, hang on. There's a problem with
because
this,
you have to have all the subsets, right? Because
every
intersection
exactly.
you have to have more stuff.
So their answer is to move, but it's still an ongoing thing, and like you say, it's a research thing now, and they have models for it. But the problem comes with ABAC, which is this attribute-based access control, is that you need a programmable model, interpreter. You need a way to compose those attributes at runtime, some glue code basically, to create those access controls for those attributes. So I guess that's maybe an interesting aspect for you as well. Is that how do you compose all of those attributes together in a way that's meaningful for the developers?
Well, that's pretty much what Pathom does, right? If we go,
yeah, well, well, I'm helping you.
Almost getting there.
Yeah, thanks. Let's enter on that, because I mean, it's much easier to understand Pathom if you first understand the motivations between this attribute modeling idea. Because then once you think like, okay, I have these huge bags of attributes and data, and then what Pathom helps to do is to unify that in a single graph without caring about how many different sources of data they are. So you get your attributes as an abstract definition, and then you create the mappings between the attributes themselves. So to provide an attribute to the user, you have to write an implementation, a resolver. That's what I call in Python, a resolver to provide that attribute. And that's something that's indexable and lookable. So, for example, if you want to have something private, just make sure you only have one implementation for it, or that all the implementations for it have that security code attached to the resolver. Because then you can write any code you want for that resolver part.
Yeah.
And even if some information depends on that, because Python can do the traversal, right? It can call many resolvers to get to the attribute. It's going to have to go through that function. So if you have a policy on that function, it's going to ensure that that's the only path to get that data. So that's makes it easier to see what maybe are the open spots in your code base.
But what was the trigger for you? What was the motivation? Because Pathom went through several iterations, right? We're at Pathom 3 now. So where did this start? Like, why did you decide to tackle this? Why did you decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to click new repository or line new, whatever, and then I'm going to solve this problem?
And I mean, Pathom started much modest. For a long time, it was just a file that I copy over from project to project when I was learning on Next. Even the name comes from OmNext, because Pathom's path from OmNext back then.
Yeah.
And so at first it was just because I was interested in OmNext applications. I like the full idea, how they connect the relay thing with the Wilker thing, have a single database.
Yep.
But OmNext was a bit raw. So when you have to implement the server side of it, you have to do a lot. You have to literally implement a parser.
Yeah.
And if you do it over and over, you start seeing like, okay, a lot of this is repeated stuff. So let's try to encapsulate this repeated stuff. So Pathom was born with that, just a namespace with a bunch of tools to help create parsers for OmNext. The big leap for Pathom was the connect part of it, because connect is what does the resolvers, indexing, and traversing, and does all the cool features people like about Pathom are actually from this connect part of it. And in the beginning, it didn't exist. The first implementations were just like, imagine one multi-method that we have one implementation for each attribute. So just implemented with one attribute at a time.
Yep.
But I was at Nubank. I was trying to use it for creating the back office application, because I was into Fulcro already by that time. Fulcro was already a thing. And I look at that, and you look at that UI. That UI is just a huge number of widgets that could grow. And widgets are written by different teams, but they have to load together in a page efficiently. So that looked to me like a great case for using Fulcro and EQL. Because we can have teams writing their widgets, composing their queries, and then we can manage the processing. So we started small, trying to write just one widget using it. And that was a hackathon. We wrote the service that handles the backend. And I was trying to implement things using the previous Python before Connect. And one specific moment was that I was trying to load customer data, let's say customer name, customer email. But the problem is this has two options. You could either get by the user ID or by the user's social security number.
Yep.
So when you look at a practical side on that, when you write the customer name attribute, you have to do like, if there is a customer ID in this, then you're going to call this function. If there is a social security number, you're going to do this. And you have to repeat that for each of those like 15 to 20 attributes. They're like, oh, this does not look nice.
It's not going to scale, no.
Yeah, it's not going to scale. This is not going to scale. And then you enter the
and then they switch to JavaScript, it's much more
easier
to write.
And you enter the desperate moment because I was trying to push this idea, and then suddenly oh, that's a problem. I don't want to push if it's that way. And I was just thinking home, and suddenly the idea came up to me like, okay, what if I change this definition type instead, and I get the definition closer to the implementation, because each endpoint is a real implementation in this case. So what if I can somehow implement just once for each endpoint? And I can say, okay, I depend on a customer ID and I'll spit you these attributes, or I depend on a social security number. And then the idea started to just fill in the head, just, okay, if I delegate the control out, then I can start indexing this information. Then I can take control of the runtime instead of doing this. That's just more like direct, right? Which feels like how GraphQL, if you implement a GraphQL API, it's going to be more like that. You have the types, and for each attribute of the type, you can have a function or something.
Yeah.
But in this case, I take control, do the indirection, so I can make a lot of more interesting things below. And that's how the connect started, and how all this attribute mumbo jumbo started to evolve.
This is the one thing that always, like with these, and again, I'm sort of going back to the attribute-based security stuff. But one of the questions you always get is like, well, how can you predict with tooling and stuff like that what you've got in the database and what the actual access paths are, and what, so essentially the same question for Pathom is like, well, what are your entities? What are your, you've got all these attributes, but how do I know, like, who can access this system, or how do I know what the people are that can access these things? So it feels to me like that's what you're building now. You're building something which can essentially tell people this stuff.
Yeah, there are different ways to go about it. In the case of Nubank, was actually pretty easy for us because we don't have to do anything about it. And the reason we don't have to do anything about it is because the endpoints are already secure. They have like access tokens. And when a user, like our services was pretty much a huge controller, right? Our service doesn't have any data by itself. It just was asking data for other services in the company. So and the person that asks our service is sending their token, and they're getting the token forwardings for all the other service. So that token is responsible for deciding if it has access to something or not. So since we are a proxy, we don't have to do anything. Like the end side would handle that for us. But in a case where somebody may be using Pathom to do more direct access to the data, then it enters a more experimental ground. But my suggestion, and what people at Wilker side does, is just do it by resolver, since a resolver is where you're exposing the data. So you can go there and make sure that the user has something. But part of the resolver call, there's the environment. So you can pull a token from the user or something, and then you can design in any way you want. It could be by scope, it could be by attributes. I think there is... I personally have not had a chance to do a lot of that. I just have some ideas that it could be even by attribute base or entity. There's some interesting exploration to be done there.
These things, I mean, I'm kind of like pulling back from a dim and distant past, but these kind of things always remind me of this project in the 2000s, I think, called Java Spaces, which was this kind of again, an attribute-based idea, but it was you built up views of things on demand, essentially. And I feel like those ideas, I think they were called, what was it? There was a general concept. Was it tuples or something? The tuple views. Maybe it's a tuple spaces. I think it was based on VJ. Do you remember?
When you say tuples, you remind me about RDF, like the triplets on RDF.
I think it kind of like was around, maybe it was a springboard from that. But these kind of concepts where essentially you're always composing views. Basically, you're never bound into a particular entity or a particular data model. You're always doing it on the fly, on demand, on a particular need. This seems to me like it's going to be the future.
Yeah, it's. I think the point here is that the bag doesn't matter, right? Any entity is just a bag of data. It's like this is how Datomic works and how Clojure Spec works as well. That's how those libraries see the world, and that's a different model that I hope we get more traction. Right now, it's still a niche stuff.
Yeah, I think because I think we're all, maybe not all of us, but when you start from the object-oriented thinking, it's always like you first define the entity, and then entity encapsulates all this state.
Yeah.
Because we free floating. Because I was just showing a datomic schema definition to someone who is from normal SQL world, and they're like, "Oh, why are they just floating around?"
Yeah.
You keep just defining attributes, and there is nothing that is defining like a person table, and then person table contains these columns sort of way. So this
Yeah.
is it's a bit of a tricky thing to get a hang of, because you tend to think, or at least if you're trained, or maybe old people like me, we tend to think, oh, there is this table entity object that I start with, and then that has some things. And then, as you said, when there is kind of an overlap, you always get into this weird fucked up situation, like child classes, inheritance in the object oriented side, and the tables, it's all a big mess of weirdly normalized shit. And so the switch seems to be fairly difficult if you're coming from that direction, right?
Yeah, it's also spreadsheets. We'll be talking about them, but the spreadsheets are kind of the same thing. You have a table,
exactly,
and then you have to get to the person and say, okay, imagine that you have just one table that has all the columns from all your different tables in the same table. That's what it's like. You're not bound by like the system. All the attributes are in the same space. They are not enclosed by different spaces.
But also all these SQL people, they argue, well, this way, but in fact, OLAP databases and sort of data warehouses and data cubes are all about getting things denormalized again. They're all about we find all of those kind of constraints of the operational database completely horrible. So let's let's give us the ability to query our data, please.
And also I think because on OLAP, you're usually interested in aggregations, right? So it's you're less interested in transactions, and then you're more into transactions as in database transactions.
Well, but aggregations end up being the bags that Wilker's talking about.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, kind of like companies like Stardog, right? That use RDF to do normalization when one giant company buys another giant company, and they have these databases that know nothing about each other. Then they rely on this highly enterprise RDF companies to make everything attribute based, so they can make sense of it. Why don't start that way?
It makes merging a lot easier. Yeah, that's for sure.
But yes, it does. You could just point and
Although I imagine actually, if just to thinking that thought experiment through a little bit more, it wouldn't be that easy, because if you have like all the attributes like in one company and all the attributes in another company, it would be easier in one sense, but then that you do have a mapping hell, I think.
You have, but at least you can have a layer that's only about that.
That's true.
I can tell you, for example, I recently wrote, I used Pathom to write migration code because we were migrating from one CRM to the other. Okay.
Oh, right. Okay.
So what I have done, we wrote some resolvers that read from the CRM A. So they all have namespace, and they all have the names that are related to the CRM A. And that's it. That layer is purely about this here. Let's have their names, Plumes.
Yeah.
And then it's all about that. There's only Plumes names. And then we got to the HubSpot, which was the other one, and their API. And then you say, okay, what we want to write, this is the query I want to, like, this is the EQL that represents the data that needs to be available for me to create that entity on the other side, to create a company or to create a member.
Yeah.
And then once you have the data from one side and the query from the other, now you can have in a separate file just resolvers that are like alias resolver, like this name is the same as this name. This name is the same as this name. And then when you need, for example, maybe the data format from one is not the same as the other. And then you write one resolver that does the translation, making the conversion. So you can work attribute by attribute until you have the queries you need fulfilled. And what's nice is that they are all very separate. Like the layer that loads the data knows nothing about the layer that's on the outside. And that's, I think, it's an interesting way because you can see it and you can follow it. And doing by attribute, you get a lot of leverage because you only kind of do things once for each, and you can evolve easier.
Yeah.
That's my experience doing it this way.
Maybe it's I'm just thinking out loud, like, isn't it going to be a kind of an issue when everybody tends to, I'm not thinking about the users of this data, right? Imagine that we are looking at this attribute based database, data make or whatever, there is something. Now there has to be either some discipline in saying what exactly a person means, like across the organization, that everybody knows that this is the, because the taxonomy needs to be shared, right? So
Yeah,
because if one application thinks employee is this and the other API thinks employee is something else, then you're in a weird situation, because either you don't show the data or you don't update the data properly, whatever. So how do you tackle this thing then? Is it going to be like another API layer or spec?
yeah. I
I don't
mean,
know.
to me, what makes the big difference here is not naming the container types like a person. We never have anything called a person, because that's gonna crash short real quick. That's where attributes are different from entities. Attributes, they are much more durable pieces, because what's the usual problem, right? You get an account, and then you try to define what an account is, and then you say, oh, an account is required to have a number, is required to have an ID, is required to have this and that. And then, for example, and then let's say you use that validation across your system, and then next day you want to temporarily save an account where you allow for partial data, then your model is screwed. Because now you have to create another one, and then you have to replicate, and that's why the entities kind of fall short, while attributes don't. Like a person name, if you define that that's a string and that has these semantics, this is not going to change easily. Also, if one attribute is broken for some reason and you realize, okay, we modeled this wrong, you don't have to lose the whole entity. You just create a new attribute. And if you use Pathom, you can make mapping so you can still use the old attribute, converting to the new or all the directions you need. So you get something that you can evolve without breaking this way, because the attributes don't break as big when entities break.
Yeah. And for the, so that, does that mean that I can use Pathom with any kind of storage, or is it only
Yes, you can use Pathom with any kind of storage, because the Pathom resolvers, they are open functions, so you can do anything you want inside of them. So you're never limited by any specific data source. It could be from memory, could be databases, could be other services.
Yeah. Nice. So what is the, so you started with OhmNext, essentially building something for OhmNext, and then now it has become like a full-fledged, what is the elevator pitch for Pathom? Like what would be the simplest way to explain it in two sentences?
I tried to work that for a long time now, but I guess, but I would say it's a
we have
library.
1 hour here, so
that helps you unify data sources via attribute modeling. I guess that's the concise way I can help.
Yeah.
I can say it.
Well, Pathom 3 on the README says logic engine for attribute processing.
Oh, I gotta change that. That's outdated.
Get on it immediately.
He's just pushing a new update to the README right now.
Yeah, this keeps changing, but I will actually take a note, because right after this call, I'm changing that.
But it's always tricky to explain when it is not, the underlying models are not well known, right? It takes a while for, especially, people need to know what you're talking about, and then if you know the taxonomy, if you know the words, and then it's much easier to relate to it. Otherwise, it sounds super confusing. So nice. Please go ahead. Yeah.
And I was going to say that one thing that I see from practical experience on the Nubank project, where, I mean, we're a platform team, so we make the infrastructure for other teams and people to code.
Yeah.
And what I see is that for people to understand just how to include more endpoints and more resolvers in the system, it used to be very simple. You just show them, hey, there's this attribute, so you're probably relying on a customer ID to pull to pull some purchases or anything like that.
Yeah.
So the writer is over, you map that to your input of your endpoint, and then you get the output, which usually doesn't have namespaces. So just put the namespaces on that, and you're golden.
Mhm.
And that's it. And to do it is like this day-to-day operation. People seem to get it really fast. When things go wrong is where people get confused.
Yeah.
But that's where I see is a way to get people to start understanding this, because they have an easy experience. They say, oh, it's just that? That's fine. So just to add pieces to it seems to be easy. But to have somebody designing it, knowing enough to design the basics of it so other people can just replicate, that's something that the number of people that like have been thinking about it is not that large.
Yeah. So before, because you were at Nubank for Clojure, how did you end up at Nubank? How did you end up in Clojure then? Or did you start with Clojure?
No. I mean, before Clojure, I've been a language junkie. I found my passion. My coding life started with HTML and JavaScript. So just doing kind of web development and making websites.
Yeah.
And then I did a lot of CMS and things like that. And then I migrated to PHP. I did a lot with PHP, then Rails. And because of Rails, I knew Uncle Bob Martin. And I see his presentation about the last programming language. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah.
Okay, that was the presentation that triggered Clojure for me.
Clojure,
yeah. And I said, okay, seems interesting. Let's have a look. And then I did. I got some books on Clojure, tried for a while, but it wasn't passion in the first, wasn't love at first sight. But then a couple months later, I was seeing a presentation on React, and the guy on React said, hey, by the way, people on Clojure are going crazy because they finally now have a way to do functional UIs. And I mean, UIs is the thing that I actually like the most. And I said, okay, time to look on Clojure again. And then since then, I got in love and like, oh, this is awesome. I just want to do this now. And that's how I got to Nubank. I was just looking for a Clojure job. And like, there's Clojure in Brazil. I knew them from the Conjun 2014. I met them there. It's like I was attending Clojure conference and I wasn't working with Clojure
yet. I mean, trust me. I mean, as an ex-conference organizer, it is probably still a thing. I mean, you get so many people who are, Clojure enthusiasts rather than
curious
Clojure practitioners. Clojure curious.
And then that's how I got to Nubank. And Nubank seems cool, company in São Paulo, and I talked to them, and they decided to hire me, and then I moved here, and then I have my happy life doing Clojure full time.
Nice.
So are you still doing the UIs as well, Wilker? Is that in your role, or are you mostly in this middleware now? Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I do. I mean, people is a startup, so we do what has to be done.
Yeah.
But I like UIs a lot. I mean, I was listening for your podcast about Membrane. With Adrian, and that was, I find that idea super cool as well. Like how I am following Tonsky with Skija stuff.
Yeah. Humble UI stuff.
Yeah, and I maintain some stuff like Pathom Vis, some UI that I keep maintaining that I have to write like an Electron app.
Yeah. Are you also contributing to Fulcro? Because I know you picked up Fulcro pretty early as well, and then you're working on libraries for Fulcro. How do you see your PHP Rails experience against Clojure web experience? Leading into Fulcro and other stuff now.
I think there is a big difference because when I did up to Rails, I was mostly doing like the server rendering web development way and not SPAs. And then migrate to SPAs was about the same time I migrate to Clojure and Clojure script. But I was a fan of React back then. But as you may know, React to conciliate with Rails kind of took a while.
Pretty much.
They're not like very friendly to each other. But for application state, like I think Clojure Clojure script is super suitable because you can get one of the best hot reloading experiences because it's all immutable data. So like we had Bruce doing Figwheel way before people were like having happiness with their storybooks and things of that. But yeah, it just changes that the communication thing becomes the API thing becomes a thing when you're doing the SPAs. Like when you're doing the server side rendering, you don't care about it, right? Just write all the getters right on your template, and that's gonna reach the database right when it's rendering the template, and it works great. That was like the before the MVC stuff.
Yeah.
But when you're going through the web, the API side, things change. That's how the whole movement of GraphQL started up because people got fed up about how many endpoints do I have to write. Now I have an iPad client, a mobile client, a desktop client, and they like all the possible subsets. And that's the same problem.
It's back to exactly the same problem as I was going to say.
It's exactly the same problem of the types and the mixing of the things. Like it's all the same problem.
Yeah. I think this is what David Nolan was saying about that, which was essentially you give the client the ability to query things, and it makes life easier. The problem with it, it makes life easier in one sense, but then again, I mean, it's a security issue. It's like, well, how do you make sure that people can see only the attributes that they're allowed to see, or only the only the non-medical information, for example, or and this is the kind of thing which GraphQL, it was a struggle at the beginning with GraphQL, I think, to inject that kind of constraints, let's say, on the view.
Yeah, it has a slight difference, but to be honest, I don't see this being that much different from REST endpoints because that's kind of the same thing, right? The way it's always controlled access. Like I don't know anybody that's in production allowing just putting a system out that allows full database access.
Yeah,
I mean, nobody does that. You always have to put your access points in front of it. So if your access point is a REST endpoint like that, and you are in that problem we discussed about the mobile iPads and that stuff, then you may have to write that in multiple controllers. And I think that's kind of the same thing when you're doing GraphQL or Pathom. When you write the code that allows for the access of it, that's where you need to do it. Of course, because of navigation, I guess what people in GraphQL and Pathom might fall shorter on that is because since the traverse of the data may become a bit more automatic, you may like let some points, some of these graph edges pass without being seen. That's kind of the problem, and you are not aware that this is happening, and then suddenly you have this path for people to
everything has to be more dynamically evaluated. I think that's the key thing.
But I believe with time we can have these things more standardized, and like it doesn't have to be something that everybody has to think about it, because nowadays it's like everyone that's designing a solution will have to sit and think, okay, how do I do this control access? I hope over time we'll have this better documented so people already have pathways set for them to go about.
Well, maybe we can like merge the attribute-based access control and the attribute-based queries. Those things could be merged.
Yeah.
That seems like I don't know. Seems like something new we've just thought of. Yeah, let's do that.
Yes, let's do it.
I'll hit you up afterwards, okay? Let's see if we can make a framework.
But where do you see this going? Because, of course, we're not talking about unifying everything to be it. Because I don't think there is any other quote-unquote mainstream databases that make attribute other than Datomic, right? Like, or maybe tuple storages or whatever, if they're available. But they're used in a very specific contexts. So Datomic is I think mostly Clojure, a subset of Clojure people knowing the power of Datomic and using it. I haven't seen anybody shouting from the rooftops like, "Hey, Datomic," and then we're done, and then let's use it in I don't know, Rust or whatever. So it seems to be like it's kind of at odds with the the rest of the programs that you design with with Clojure, there seems to be to use this weird weasel word like a synergy between language and code and data and the database. But do you see any other things popping up like this, or do you see that this is gonna picked up by other mainstream technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is about culture, right?
Mm,
The reason we have so many databases and things modeled this way is because it's our mainstream culture of programming.
mm,
Um, and that's one reason that why Python. The nice thing about Python is that you can wrap and you can add your namespaces, so you don't have to rely on a data source that's
mm,
using attributes under the hood. Like you can have this translation layer, so
yeah.
we can leverage. We need to be able to leverage all these database because
Mm,
otherwise we'd be stuck.
yeah.
One like non conventional example that I can say is that you guys are familiar are aware of auto merge.
Yes.
Mm,
Yeah,
Auto
it's like
merge.
it's like that with merging documents in different times, different timelines.
Yeah, it's
Like
CRDTs.
CRDT.
You know
yes. Yeah.
CRDTs.
Okay. Yeah. CRDTs. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, auto merge is an implementation of CRDTs
Okay.
by
Okay. Yeah.
Martin Kaplan. Martin
Yeah.
Kaplan.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I trust the guy's work.
Hmm.
And one of the architectures I've been experimenting with another day was that I put a pattern code on a web worker with auto
Hmm.
merge. So now you can have the data going through an auto merge and have all these clients synchronizing over it. But the thing is, with auto merge, you really don't want to have a single document because
Hmm.
the documents in auto merge, they're kind of like atomic. They kind of grow forever, and they
Yep.
have all the history of everything that happened. So
Hmm.
they use for the process of merging. So what people tend to do, that I see people doing when they want to scale this up, is just have many documents. So you have
Mm,
documents pointing to documents, and this is just standard JavaScript interface. And you can
mm,
completely, totally wrap that on Python, so you don't see any of this fuss of looking in a file, looking for another file, look for an index in the file, and you map that because down the layer, if you agree with the attribute modeling, you only have two things, right? Entities and attributes, and they
yep.
are linking each other.
Yep.
How this is happening doesn't really matter, and the
Mm,
developer that's using the data don't need to care about it.
yeah.
So I think it could be a culture shift if a lot of people start doing it and seeing the value of modeling things this way, because then they can
Yeah.
see, oh, yeah, but like one complaint I see with using patterns that I'm really annoyed by having all these adapters that I have to write, like add namespace here, remove namespace there, add namespace here, remove namespace there. But that's really important for Python, so you
Yeah.
can't really go without it.
Yeah.
But it could be that at some point people are like, okay, I do all of this. Maybe my database can save stuff like that, and Atomic
Mm,
can.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
who knows? Who knows? We can dream about a future like that.
So you mean it's more like the application design choice rather than the data storage engine, because that can be
Yeah,
relevant by using things like Pathom. Okay,
yeah.
interesting.
But also, can you? I mean, is it something which you can like have as data that you can store on the side in a database that you're aware of, or don't you want to get into that game? You don't want to get into the game yourself of having like a channel into the database or a channel into the persistence environment.
Right now, it's not any focus of Python to do that. Python is just to be really. Python is a big controller, really.
Hmm.
Python
Mm,
doesn't have any specific things for read or write. It's just the communication layer that you can use via EQL to make all this
Right.
communication. Like you can design a whole system that is purely EQL based on communication, because you can ask
mm,
anything you want by asking the corresponding attributes, and you can do the mutations, which are just symbols, which are pretty much like function calls that you define
Hmm.
what they mean on each
yep.
context. So the details of the implementation need to be really open, and that's kind of my focus now, try to get this part working well. Because I have a bigger plan that's like my dream architecture,
Okay.
That's when
you heard it here first, folks.
we already
Right,
we
come
already
on.
said a completely new design idea, and now this. Okay.
Okay, come on, spill the tea then.
no, it's this, but this is a consequence of this design. It's more of a consequence,
Yeah.
something you can get to. There is how you can integrate these kinds of services, because you can integrate multiple GraphQLs via federation. I don't know if you guys read about it.
Yeah.
The problem is that the federated GraphQL needs to be designed for federation. So you can't just like say, oh, I have a GitHub GraphQL and I have a GitLab GraphQL. Let me just merge those together. That's not so easy to do, because you have to care about what's on the query root, and they don't collide. And you have all the types problem, the same type problems we've been discussed, right? You can't easily map things from one to the other. But on the attribute-based systems, if you have those two, then the names are completely different for starters. So there is no clashing on that. And you can write manual mapping. So part of the work on Pathom 3 was to allow for this feature. The feature that, let's say those services are already in Pathom for during save. If you want to integrate with GraphQL and GitHub, all you have to do is make a way to make a request to it. If you give me a way to make a request to it and get the response, that's all you need. Because then Pathom is gonna ask for the indexes of that service. They Pathom puts those indexes on your current instance. And when you make queries, Pathom can do the orchestration. They say, okay, this part of the query needs to go to GitHub. This part of the query needs to go to GitLab. So you can use all the data from one other plus the resolvers you write on your own. So you create this system where the integration becomes just pointing to it. And you don't have to, would be much, much easier to integrate any APIs in this way than any form I know nowadays.
Just, I don't know if this is a interesting diversion, but what future do you see for EQL? Because for me, it's a sort of underplayed hero in a lot of environments, EQL. But I don't know if a lot of people are really fully aware of it, of this Eden query language.
Yeah, and I just baptize it, to be honest. David Nolan is the responsible for creating most of it. The reason that the name EQL system exists is because there is Fulcro and Pathom, and both needed it. So I was talking. So me and Tony K, that is the guy who writes and maintains Fulcro.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, yeah, and we're answering for questions on Slack and say, yeah, the next query syntax. And we have both the no name and the code duplicated between Pathom and Fulcro. They say, hey, let's fix it up. So I just extracted the code, put a name on it, EQL sounds like catchy, short, small.
Yeah,
let's just call it there.
Yeah.
Let's call it there and then reuse it. And I think Crux also uses it, and Pyramid. I think the new libraries are using the name as well, which is nice. It's cool. They are using the names in the code from EQL. And EQL is just about the shape description, like is the layer we can use to communicate. So as a communication layer, I think it's great. And Pathom to me is just one implementer of a query processor for EQL, but Fulcro itself has its own implementer for it that reads from the local map database, because it's more efficient for them, because it's very specific, while Pathom tries to be more dynamic and broad and do complex data sources. But people can use EQL as they see fit, and if we all at least agree on the syntax, it's easier to reuse across different sources, right?
So it's not directly competing with GraphQL then, or is it something?
But it is recursive.
I think it does.
So
Huh?
it's recursive, so it is.
Yeah, it is competing with GraphQL in that sense. They're just both a language to describe requirements. But EQL is much lightweight because EQL was designed with the principle that the language itself is data, and that gives us some leverage. For example, we don't have to write features for partials or variables or any of that because it's all data. If you want a partial, just drop the thing inside of it. Because while GraphQL was when they designed it, they thought about, okay, people are gonna use these as strings, like SQL. So because they're gonna use it as strings, I need to have interpolation features and like extension features, and then they have all these crazy features like conditionals and this kind of stuff that we don't need because for us it's just data. Yeah, all the parsing, all this stuff.
You can't just do a read string on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I can bring another interesting thing about the attribute modeling that I can say we did at Nubank is that you can have generators for the attributes as well, right? So one thing that I found was really efficient, like people like this, is that when you're creating a new widget, maybe you don't have the server stuff ready yet, or you don't want to hit a server to try it. So because the queries are just EQL, we had a processor for EQL that it just scan the query and use generators to fill everything. Like, it doesn't try to be consistent anyway.
Okay. Yeah,
but this is super cool because then you have the component when you try. We use workspaces there. That's like dev cards differently. And then you can have a widget that you create and you just keep pressing the restart button and keeps generating data. So you can keep seeing the component. You can interact with the component without having any real server. And just because these attributes are flowing this.
Yeah. So that makes the whole UI development much more, I think, realistic because you're actually playing with the data, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we don't have to have dependencies like, I need to find a user that has this status or this or this or that. You can both just or fill manually or just keep refreshing until the state kind of looks like what you want to see.
Yeah. Nice. So maybe going back to Clojure, because you've been using Clojure for a long time already. So are there any things that you miss, maybe not from PHP?
Man.
Or maybe let's put it this way, like, are there still any pain points that you think, okay, this is something that gotta change hopefully one day in Clojure or Clojure ecosystem or tooling or everywhere? Or is there something like, you know what, fuck this, I'm going back to PHP moment?
No, I mean the only thing that was really nice about PHP in that sense was that the deployment was quite easy, right? You just put a file in the FTP.
Put the file in there.
Yeah, man. Like back then, we even added on the FTP.
Exactly, just right? there.
We fixed bugs via FileZilla editing.
You can REPL into the thing, but it's not the same experience. I agree.
But I mean, this is one of the frustrations for me, and one of the reasons I like Deps.Eden is that Deps.Eden gives you that capability again. You just drop your files in and just restart the application, and bam, you're done basically.
Yeah, but on PHP, you don't. There is no restarting, so it's just refresh the page and you're done, and there is nothing there. Well, it breaks in mysterious ways, but anyway.
But that's
the connection pool that you have to manage without a real application.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old times.
But isn't that like if you think about the way that you have an application, you can have file watchers, on your FTP site or your server side, and you can just restart yourself. It's actually quite easy to do that. You don't need to have a whole full redeploy and everything.
Yeah, but nowadays we actually have a very close to PHP option to do that. There is deploying with Babashka. Just deploy a service with like those Nginx proxies, and you have a Babashka that's working pretty much like a PHP process.
We
have come full circle back to CGI.
It's just a scripting environment. Yeah, bam, just to make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have that, so I can't miss that from PHP anymore. Sorry, PHP.
That's true.
What you're saying is that Bork Dude has like written PHP for you. Yeah.
In a sense, yes.
I'm sure you should be proud of that.
Along with the many awesome things you have been doing for the community, yes.
I'm sure Mikhail will be delighted to know he brought PHP to Clojure.
Actually, from that sense, he would. I'm sure he would be, because it's.
But I mean, my question is, when somebody's gonna write my Clojure to PHP compiler?
Exactly. Yeah. I think.
Don't give him ideas. Don't give Bork Dude ideas. You know, it's like he's got enough ideas. We don't need to give him any more. You know.
I find Bork Dude awesome because, like, sometimes you see a problem that you don't even care that much about the problem. You're just like, oh man, yeah, this is not working, but it's not a big deal. Like, my last experience with Dean was kind of with Meander. I was like, the thing with Babashka is that I can't use Meander yet, and it's kind of like, oh, why? They say, not running, and then I go do something else, and I back to my computer 1 hour later. There's Bork Dude. Hey, by the way, 80% of it's working now. I just have to finish this 2 pieces. And like, what?
Nice.
So awesome. He's awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
So
that seems like a feature of the podcast. Almost every Clojure podcast these days, it's the Bork Dude is awesome feature.
He's also one of the release notes anyway. There is a Bork watch or something that
Alex. Bork watch on the Clojure stuff. Yeah, because you have to separate.
Yes. Yeah. He needs his own segment in every Clojure media.
Yes.
Yeah, because he alone produces half of the open source work of the Clojure community. So.
Exactly. He needs to be protected at all costs.
The bus factor is ridiculous. Yeah.
Anyway, but on that note, so is there any? But the question was reasonably serious. I think is there something that Clojure you're waiting for, or something that is going to, based on your experience, that this is gonna take Clojure to the next level, that you think, apart from the deployment stuff that you talked about?
Yeah, not right now. There was a feature I was waiting for a long time, but landed on Clojure 1.11. That was the lightweight aliasing of keywords.
Yeah.
I even tried to poach for it, putting it on my talk, say, hey, I care a lot about this issue. That was the big one for me, because this makes much more easier to handle the long attributes. If you're really trying to go full in on that, it was a pain in the past that you have to have a namespace if you want to use an alias, or you have to write the full thing. So now that you can have that, especially in Clojure script, because in Clojure you could hack it out by writing require and then alias on the app itself, and that would work, but not on Clojure script. So now I think this opens the space for it. Other than that, maybe better error matches, but
I think at this point everybody got used to it. I think if it changes, then everybody is going to get pissed. I think now, if the error messages get better, then everybody's like, "What the fuck is this? I can't understand anything anymore." I want those 2,000 line stack traces with Clojure RT.
I don't know. I think they see it as a solved problem now. That's which is.
Yeah, but I don't have much a problem with them, but since a problem that a lot of people complain it, especially beginners.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a solved problem, but I don't think it's high on the list anymore.
Yeah.
What about you guys? You have something you are waiting for?
Just before we move on, what about the difference between
we don't use Clojure anymore. We just use Python
and PHP
and PHP. Yes.
That's why we're so excited about Babashka, the PHP parsers. No, the other question I had for you about the Clojure stuff was you're using spec, I think, with some of the Pathom stuff. So how is that working out?
Not with Pathom itself. I mean, for Pathom development, I use guardrails, which is from Tony K as well, Clojure, to spec the functions. But it only runs if you specifically ask it to. You can do it via flag on the JVM or via a defined some Clojure script.
Right.
So it helps me out because keep checking the input and output of every function. I like that for it. But on Pathom itself, if you just use Pathom and do nothing, like spec is something you can plug on the outside or not.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I've been doing on that sense is that I wanted to use EQL as a language to also not as just to demand data, but also to validate data.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of looks like what Spec 2 does. But I wanted to do it Spec because we're all waiting for Spec 2 to be final to start using it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted something like that. So write a small library that can get an EQL, get a piece of data, and validate. So we can ensure it has all the attributes you ask, and if the attributes match the specs they have.
Mm.
And this is what we want to use for validating messages or any kind of HTTP endpoints we need. So if you if on a Kafka message, you can specify the schema of that using an EQL schema. So that's the closest thing I've been using. The most interesting thing, the way I think I've been using Spec lately.
Yeah. I wasn't aware of that actually, but that's really interesting.
Nice. So I think I still have my question left. So use Emacs or some other shit.
I have listened to the last released episodes of you, so I'm not sure what happened on the one you didn't release yet. But if that was in Emacs, I'm breaking the streak here because there was a lot of Emacs going on.
Then I'm not going to publish this episode. You know that. It depends on the answer. We only release Emacs episodes now.
That's why all the episodes have Emacs.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah. So sorry. I mean, we've been going for an hour and a half now. But if you don't use Emacs, it's a waste of time. You know.
Exactly. Yeah. The entire audio file goes to dev null, and we're done. And then if somebody asks Wilker who, I have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, normally you ask this question early doors to kind of cut the conversation short, don't you? You know?
Yeah. Usually this is the first question, and then that decides whether we should record or not. Yeah.
Well, I've been a Vim user for a long time, actually.
Okay.
But nowadays I am an IntelliJ user for the most.
Yeah.
But I recently also been thinking about trying the Emacs thing. So it's on my list. I feel like I'm ready to try a new editor because
new editor, which has been there for 40 years.
A new for me, a new editor.
Yeah. Of course.
It's because when I went on Vim, like I spent 5-6 years doing Vim. And then I went to IntelliJ because it just worked. And then I said, I may learn Emacs. Sounds interesting. They're like, I have to learn a lot of these king bindings again. I'm not doing that. And then I put it for a rest. And that was like 4 years ago. So now I think I'm on a point that I'm ready to try it again because I've been trying other editors. I made a setup for me on Sublime, on VS Code, on Atom. I was trying them. But kind of all they suck, to be honest.
Yeah.
For you anyway.
They always have this. Yeah. So I'm thinking of giving a new chance to Emacs. I mean, they all have the browser cons.
Yeah, I think you're just licking his toes at the moment, though. Come on. You're just trying to get your episode published, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we have to do the politics, right? I mean, we did all this time. I show my dog. I have to get this thing published.
The only reason we continue to record is because of your dog. And now because Emacs, you're going to be willing to try, so that's fair enough, I think.
Okay.
We'll get
yes, I got it. Yes,
I think if you're really into Vim, then I can recommend trying Doom Emacs maybe because that's a really Vim fanatic.
But to be honest, I replaced my idea. For example, for me on IntelliJ, for example, I do use something called Ace Jump. I guess
that. That's there. That's already there in Vim and
Emacs. And I realized.
You're getting very excited now, Wilco, because he's like, maybe he will be using Emacs.
Look, that is the funny thing because the reason why Emacs or Vim are still there is because they are like time tested open source shit, and regardless of all these editors are gonna die in. Okay, there are a few other exceptions like BB Edit, for example, on Mac. which has been like 30 years now, which is crazy.
Yeah,
So there are some
but
things.
who still uses TextMate?
Yeah, exactly. But TextMate has, I think it has its peak when Rails was hip and everything, and then
Yeah.
it just disappeared. It's still open source, so it's a reasonable editor. But that is the nice part about these things, that they're going to be there, and the source is
Yeah.
there, so you can compile, you can run it, and which is the
Yeah.
key part, that the whole free as in beer sort of thing that people keep missing. And it's not just because it has features. I'm not saying it's the best editor, because I do, every now and then I'm poly editor sometimes, and then I switch to other ones. And recently I started using Nova, which is like a commercial editor from Panic, which is those guys are Mac software builders for ages.
What's the exciting thing about this editor?
No, it's just a native editor, and they actually wrote their own text engine, because they found a lot of bugs in Apple's text kit, and then they just made their own thing, and it's blazing fast, and it's beautiful to look at, because it takes all the Mac aesthetics into it. But anyway, but it's nothing is gonna make me go away from Emacs anyway. That's the whole point. But yeah, I mean, if you use AceJump, for example, there is AceJump for everything in Emacs, including buffers and all that shit, and everything can be AceJump. It's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you combine AceJump and ParEdit, then I don't miss the Vim stuff anymore, because I can jump anywhere and I can operate with the structure stuff. So this makes me don't miss as much the Vim, all the Vim surrounds and deletes. And
yeah.
And do you think this editor, like, compare? Oh, I was just curious, when the new editor you're saying, how do you compare with Sublime Text in terms of performance? Because Sublime is
I haven't that's true.
By...
I haven't used Sublime in Anger, but I'm pretty sure it would live on par, because also it's very much optimized for Mac, right? So it's a really just one hardware application, one software application. So it's an expensive one, but it's some of the Mac software that I buy, because there is certain sense of aesthetic to it. They just look nicer on Mac. They play well with the whole operating system. Rest of the shit looks like this Electron crap, and none of it works as it is supposed to. Yeah. Anyway, I think that concludes our editor segment of this. Any other things that we missed, Wilker? Because I know you've been at doing Pathom for, I think, what it seems to be like 30 years now.
After pandemics, yes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Did we miss anything? Anything you want to highlight before we conclude?
Oh no, I think we went through all the important stuff. I mean, the other project I work sometimes is Workspaces, but then I think it ended up being a niche productive thing for Fulcro developers. But if anybody wants to take a look, I think it's a nice alternative for dev cards or Storybook. But to be honest, Storybook's better. And if you can do Storybook, just go for it.
You're not a great salesman.
He wants to archive it. That's it.
Nice. Anyway, but Wilker, it's a pleasure to see you again. Virtually at least. Hopefully we'll meet again in person. I know that. So Clojure is on. We'll be there. The whole the entire crew and cast of Defen will be there. So all three of us.
What Clojure D?
Yeah, Clojure D in Berlin.
When is it again?
June
the
11th. Yeah, June 11th.
June 11th. I gotta check.
Maybe you should fly in.
I should check. I have a festival to go to in Europe this year.
Oh, okay.
That I have been waiting for. I got the ticket in 2019, so I'm really looking forward to it.
That's a common thing, isn't it? Yeah, they just keep on cancelling and then saying they'll do it again.
So I have to see the dates. Yeah, to do about that and with Debbie, right? I have to now care about Debbie.
Oh yeah,
that's a blocker for traveling now.
Yeah, I'm bringing my dog to Clojure D, so
It's not as
Nice.
far though, in fairness, is it?
Not, yeah, it's just. I mean, give or take few hours compared to Brazil. I think-
Yeah, but I'll see if I can show up. It'll be really good. Really good
yeah,
to
that'd
see
be
you guys
super
there.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe we can come to some conference in Brazil. Clojure
Yeah.
South.
Oh yeah, Clojure South. Yeah.
That would be
It
really
seems
good.
like the
if that
whole,
came again.
pretty much entire Clojure, 99% of the Clojure developers are in Brazil now. So it makes sense to show up there, I think.
Yeah,
some
Nubank got not just the thing, they got locked the company, and then they told me got everything. So now we are
exactly.
We've got no excuse not to go there.
So it seems like Brazil is the new Mecca for Clojure. We just need to go there and then make a pilgrimage.
I mean, I think if we can put it on business expenses, it works for me. So.
Yeah, we should always do that. That's why it's great to do talks abroad, right? You can put on the company expenses for the trip, and it works great for everyone.
Totally
Excellent.
So I think we should say go and subscribe to our Patreon. So give us money so we can go to Brazil.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You want us in South America?
Yes, we do.
Anyway.
Taking some caipirinhas and stuff like that.
Yes. Awesome. Wilker, it's been a pleasure, and awesome work doing with Pathom and also full crow work. I know you've been very active in the community in that sense, and also you're pushing things forward, right? You're thinking about the next level of next way or better way to solve the problems that we have. So that's really amazing. So we'll keep an eye for the new thing that you're thinking about. So. I think by the time this episode pops out in a few weeks, I'm pretty sure you will have a new repository and your whole architecture will be there. So no pressure.
And I'll bet the project's going to be called Debbie.
Yes.
Could be.
Yeah.
Has to be something like that.
Yeah, she's very super cute. So look after her and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
No, I like to thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I love your podcast. I think you do awesome work.
Thank you.
People and spreading things around. Like I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts, and it's a great place to get to the edgy, high-end stuff. So I really appreciate all the work you're doing as well. So thanks for having me.
Magic.
Yeah,
thanks, man.
We don't we're not high on information, but with the noise, yes. Our signal to noise ratio is pretty shitty, but okay.
Yeah, there's no ratio.
Anyway, no, it's just nice. Thanks a lot, Wilker, and good luck with Debbie. And please post photos on Twitter, so we'll follow.
When I start having problems with her, I'll ask you dog tips from you now.
Of course.
Excellent. This podcast is moving over to dogs. I mean, it's a wider audience. I mean, we got to
totally. Certainly, 2 more people than Clojure developers. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DefN. And the awesome vegetarian music or the track is Melon Hamburger by Pizzeri. And the show's audio is mixed by Wouter Dullert. I'm pretty sure I butchered his name. Maybe you should insert your own name here, Dullert.
Wouter.
If you'd like to support us, please do check out our Patreon page, and you can show your appreciation to all the hard work or the lack of hard work that we're doing. And you can also catch up with either Ray, with me, for some unexplainable reason. You want to interact with us, then do check us out on Slack, Clojurian Slack or Clojureverse, or on Zulip, or just at us at DefN Podcast on Twitter. Enjoy your day and see you in the next episode.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure where this part shows up in the magic that Wouter does later.